Hi, I'm Carlin Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Carolyn Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Well, hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to The Cult. The Cult is a show that I stream on my YouTube channel, as well as on Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, Getter, Twitter, Facebook, all the other places as well, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. On Saturdays, we go live at 6 p.m. Eastern Time for Socialism Saturday, of course, our special socialism stream. And we cover all aspects of the culture war, but we do it a little differently than on other channels because we do deep dives into what is actually going on to give you a sneak preview of what's coming. My community is so far ahead of the journalists, the pundits, the commentators. In fact, we are so far ahead of like normal people on the internet because we watch what's coming next. We don't watch the latest thing. We don't obsess over whatever people are talking about on TikTok. We don't engage in outrage porn. We watch where it's actually coming from, the origin of all of the incredibly cultish ideas that are taking over our society today. And, well, at least for today, that's going to be the universities. Because, as we all know, the cultural revolution that we are experiencing in this country was driven by the universities. And so if you want to know what's coming next, you don't look to TikTok, you don't look to Instagram, you don't look to Twitter, you look to the universities. Because TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, social media, that's what's happening now. In fact, a lot of times, you know what's funny? James O'Keefe is so fucking far behind what's going on. And I say that because O'Keefe Media Group today posted this big expose. Oh my God, Best Buy is doing racialized training for its employees. Like, welcome to 3 years ago, James O'Keefe. We're so like honestly, this isn't even news anymore. This happens all over the place. This has been happening all over the place for years. But they don't know this because the pundits, the commentators, the journalists, the people who hold themselves up as the experts, the Twitterati, They don't actually pay attention to what's coming next. They pay attention to what's happening right now. Today, we are going to be going on a trip to Lydia's alma mater. Lydia, honey, I am so sorry to break this news to you, but I was trolling around the YouTubes looking for interesting things to watch, and I happened to stumble upon the fact that Hofstra University, which is a private university in New York, has like 11,000 students. Hofstra University hosted an Antifa conference. They hosted a legitimate Antifa conference, and not only did they host an Antifa conference, they put all the presentations on YouTube. So the reason I was like looking around for like this sort of thing is because, as you guys know, Andy No, who is incomparable. Andy No is one of the people that I will actually never shit talk on the internet, because I actually do think that Andy No's work is second to none. I think he's great. I think that he has done things that few other people were willing to do, and I have nothing but respect for Andy No. He is one of the very few influencers that I will never take to task, because there's just no reason to. But Andy No sued Antifa because they injured him severely, and sadly he lost. Yeah, that's right, Fish Addict. Andy No got effed by the court in Portland. He got completely effed. And so I was thinking about this problem of like of Antifa in general, and I was looking around for just like Antifa content. And usually when I look for Antifa content, I'm not looking at like Vice News, I'm not looking at any of those things. I'm looking for like socialist bookstores. I'm looking for small little channels that are actually more connected to what's going on the ground than like Vice News and like all this stuff that they're just making stuff up to cover for like Antifa shenanigans. And in the course of looking around at a whole bunch of like bookstore YouTube channels and stuff like that, I happened to come across that Hofstra University hosted an Antifa conference. And so you can see here on their YouTube channel, they have all sorts of presentations. This was 8 months ago. So they have Anti-Fascist Culture Warriors, case study of music and memorials, roundtable local anti-fascism action, anti-fascism as an anti-colonial project. This is all from the same conference. Adolf Reed keynote, the keynote of the anti-fascism conference. I don't know who that is, but we're not going to watch that today, so not matter. Anti-fascism in the streets, contemporary European Antifa, teaching anti-fascism. Isn't that nice? Teaching anti-fascism. Communicating anti-fascism, struggles, tactics, and implications. Building a global anti-fascist movement. And the presentation that we're going to be watching today, because to me, this just seemed like the most appropriate place to start, challenging the appeal of fascism. So that is the presentation that I selected for us to watch today. This is just one of the many panels that they had on their like from this conference, but I was like, I have to choose one. And it just made sense to me to start with, like, they did this whole panel about challenging the appeal of fascism. And I was kind of like, what do they think fascism is? Like, what do these people believe the problem is? And so that's the presentation we're going to be watching today, guys. It is called Anti-Fascism in the 21st Century Conference. This was on November 3rd, 2022, so a little less than a year ago. This is relatively recent, and this is this is a panel, the relevance of like understanding and overcoming fascism's mass appeal, and it's with Kurt Stand of Democratic Socialists of America. And then it says Neoliberalism and the Counter-Resistance in the U.S., Reflections on Public-Private Distinction. And that is Deborah Spencer from Emory and Henry College. And then the commentator is Barry Cohen, the Portside and New Jersey Institute of Technology chair of something or other. So that's nice. That's nice. You know, the funny thing about this, guys, and why I really do rag on journalists and commentators and influencers and all that stuff, because none of them ever do their damn homework, is all of this stuff is available on the internet. These people say the quiet part out loud all the time. Literally, all we need to do is sit our butts down and listen to what they're saying and watch what they're saying, and they will tell us what they're doing. They will tell us what their plans are. They do not keep it a secret. This is a presentation at a college. They're not doing this to throw us off the track. They are doing this to organize. They're doing this to speak to their people, and then they're so blatant about it that they just put it on the internet and no one ever effing watches it. There have only been 126 views on this presentation since it was uploaded to the internet 8 months ago. Can we just wrap our heads around that for a minute? You want to know why we're losing? It's because these people will tell you what they're going to do, and no one pays attention until I'm trolling around the internet and I'm like, there was an Antifa conference at a major university. What the what? So yes, bot, we are going to today be watching this panel because I want to know what they think the problem is. Like, what do they think fascism is? How do they think fascism is manifesting in the United States? How crazy are their ideas? I have no idea, but the fact that they're holding an Antifa conference gives me pause. Starry RZ says, didn't the Michigan teacher training also have very low views until I found it? Starry, it wasn't even that. The Michigan teacher training was on a Google Drive. They was just like an unpassword protected Google Drive that someone sent me the folder to, and we watched the training. Like, it wasn't even on the internet. It was like an open unpassword protected Google Drive. Yes, that is exactly right, Carolyn. We are losing because of apathy. We are losing because people whose job it is to keep you informed fail over and over and over again because they are only interested in clickbait to outrage people, to get shares on the internet, to get views, to get hearts and likes and retweets so that they can make money. That's all they're interested in. No one is actually interested in keeping you informed. No one is actually interested in showing you what's going on, showing you receipts, letting you decide for yourself how you feel about it, except apparently for me. I don't want to say just me. There are probably other people out there doing this too, but like I don't know who else is doing this. So I'm going to do the best I can for now. You know what I'm saying? But speaking of which, Carolyn says we don't hold them accountable. No, you guys don't. But you know what you can do, Carolyn? You know what you can do? Is you can support the work I'm doing to help keep me in business because, guys, I report only to you. Listen, I am a dangerous person to a lot of people on the internet. I'm a dangerous person to people on the right. I'm a dangerous person to people on the left. And the reason I'm a dangerous person to people on both the right and the left is that I don't care about their tribalist nonsense. I am not going to play their games. I am not going to speak their talking points just because they've given me a list of talking points and say, Carlin, this is what you need to say. And yes, that has actually happened. They have actually tried to do that. I am not going to pander for them. I am not going to hide things from you or omit things from you. I'm going to tell you the truth. And I'm going to show you the receipts. And you can decide what you think about it. But I'm not going to pander to anyone's political desires or anything like that. And so because of that, I need to be completely funded for my work by you, by a grassroots army of people who just want to know what's going on in the world and just want a nuanced perspective and just want to be shown the truth so that you can decide for yourselves what you think. No, none of you need a commentator or a pundit or a journalist or any of these things to tell you what to think. You are all intelligent people. If you're on my channel, I know you have at least an IQ of 100, if not higher. So you're all intelligent people. You can all decide for yourselves what you think about this. My job is to show you what's going on, the things that I think are the most important, and then you decide what to do with it. Now, if you want to support the work I'm doing, the very, 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 very best place that you can do that is by subscribing to my Substack, which is Carlyn, Karlyn, .substack.com. Now, of course, I do have many Substacks, guys, but this Actively Unwoke is my main Substack. If you're only going to subscribe to one of them, this is the one that I recommend you subscribe to because this is my content home base. This is where I do all my best content, all my best written content on the internet. I also have a couple podcasts on there. This is where I communicate out to my community. This is where you're going to get the most up-to-date information, just like this article that I posted last night. Because, guys, guess what? In California, they're about to pass a bill, and you can go see the bill on the website. And this bill essentially says that they will put you in prison if you are just too uppity at a school board meeting. It really does say that. California is legislating against parents speaking out at school board meetings. How they're doing this is they're saying if you go to a school board meeting or a board of education meeting or the school in general and speak to anyone associated with the school and you torment or terrorize them, then you can be fined between $500 and $1,000 and you can go to prison for up to 1 year. Now, the issue with this is we live in an era where people literally say silence is violence, words are violence, and you are if you question my lived experience, you are literally killing me. So, what is the definition of torment? What is the definition of terrorize? Is using words you don't like, torment or terrorize, and you know exactly what's going to happen in California. California is going to bend those rules and make them as liberal as possible to mean a conservative showing up at a school board meeting saying words they don't like is going to count as torment or terrorized, and then that person is going to get fined, and if they do it again they could go to prison for almost a year. That's just one of the crazy bills that are being debated right now in California. There's also a group of moms in California. If any of you are in California and can connect with this group of moms, you can find the link over on the Substack. They are working to testify on the bills and to at least have some sort of voice against it. California, of course, is totally commie at this point, so the bills are probably going to pass. But you know what? I like to see people fighting the good fight, and I would encourage you to fight the good fight. Speak out against this stuff. Go do testimony in at the Capitol. Go make your voice heard while you still can. The information is on the Substack if you want more about that. And that is just one of the articles I've got on the Substack. We've also got all sorts of stuff on there, like the Woke 101 series, the Woke Mind series, My Day with the Socialist series, all sorts of good stuff that you can find. Much of my content is available for free. Some of it's available behind a paywall. And you can support the work I'm doing for $8 a month or $80 a year over on the Substack, which I really, really do appreciate. And again, guys, I can't do it without you. You guys literally keep me in business. Another way you can support my work is by heading over to the Unwoke Art store, which is unwokeart.com. Link is in the description below. And let me just pop the link in the chat as well, just in case. I got all sorts of great merch on the Unwoke Art store to include the limited edition Trump Indictment Victory Tour t-shirt. Now, do you know how great this t-shirt is? The Chinese have stolen it. I'm not kidding. There's a Chinese company. I made this design. There is a Chinese company that stole my design and is currently selling it on their website. But do you know what? Do you know why I'm not worried about this? Well, two reasons. Number one, the quality of the merchandise on my website is so effing good. I'm not doing any cheapo like t-shirts here that fit like a box that are really rough to the touch. This is like a really nice jersey fabric. It's soft, it's light, it feels good to wear. I'm actually wearing the same fabric right now in the Be Different t-shirt. It's so nice and soft, and it's like the best fabric in the world. So I know their quality is going to be shit and mine's going to be better. But the Chinese company was so lazy when they stole my t-shirt that they didn't even steal all the designs. They just stole the front of it. This is a concert t-shirt, guys. This was inspired by t-shirts that you get at rock concerts that have like tour dates on the back. And on the back of my original, the only real version on the internet, on the back of my t-shirt, you have printed every single indictment that Trump has gotten so far. Just like a concert t-shirt has tour dates on the back, we got the Trump indictments on the back. So that is a limited edition design currently available in the Unwoke Art store right now. I've got it on t-shirt, tank top, hoodies. I've even got a women's cut t-shirt because people have been begging me for that. That is a limited edition, which means once it's out of the store, it might not come back. So get it while you can. Of course, I do also have the All Tears Are Tasty merchandise, and I've got my special All Tears Are Tasty tumbler right here. Let me just make the picture really, really, really big. Oh, Look how good that looks. Look how good that came out. This is actually like a really great tumbler. I'm using it on my desk to drink my water out of. I got my straw and it doesn't come with a straw. I put that in myself. But doesn't it look good? Just in case people are worried about how the colors turn out, they really do look that cool, man. I'm so excited about all the Tears Are Tasty merchandise. We've got it on the tumbler, the stickers, the mugs, the magnets, the hoodies, the t-shirt, all that good stuff. And there's so much more available on the Unwoke Art website. You can have a look around, and if anything strikes your fancy, all purchases do, of course, go to support the work I'm doing, and I really do appreciate it. RJ says, I would love an All Tears Are Tasty tank top. All right, RJ. All right. All right. Now, RJ, do you like this kind of tank top, or do you want it to be like a strappy thing? I can hook you up with both. I'll make some more All Tears Are Tasty merch if you really want it, but I'm happy to do that for you since you've asked so nicely. And so I will get that done. Maybe even on the stream. Who knows? Maybe I'll even just add another item on the stream, and I can update you as we go. Let me know what you'd like. All right, guys, please make sure you mount that like button for me. Let's see. There's a pretty big discrepancy between the number of people watching right now and the number of people mounting that like button. So while I get the sound set up for this here stream, please go ahead and mount the like button. Of course, mounting the like button lets YouTube know to actually recommend my content to people because we have to game the YouTube algorithm on this channel. And so the more people who are mounting the like button, the more people can come and join us to watch the Antifa, at least one presentation from the Antifa conference at Hofstra University. And that is what we're going to be watching today, guys. So I'm just looking for that number to go up, and I will wait patiently until I see a few more likes. We've got Philosophist. He stroked the like button today. Thank you, Philosophist. Bot licked the like button. That's pretty good. Oh, you want the t-shirt to work out in. Okay, all right, I'll hook you up. Don't worry about it. You could also just cut the sleeves off the t-shirt or do the cool thing like I have with the shoulders. Let's see. Every day, why would you smash my like button, everyday therapist? I generally discourage smashing of the like button on this channel, but I guess you do you, I guess. Vince explained the new law to the like button cordially because Vince is, of course, a gentleman. And Terry sensually stroked the like button. You can do whatever you like to that like button, guys, as long as you do something to it. I will leave the rest up to you. All right, let's get this party started. We are watching an Antifa conference at Hofstra University from about 8 months ago, and I want them to explain to us what they think fascism is and what they're fighting. All right, let's get this party started.
I would like to call the prayer meeting to order. So my name is Barry Cohen. I have the privilege of chairing one of these sessions at what I think is a really important
How is the sound, guys?
And original conference and a timely gathering here. So like others, I will begin by saying
I'm going to turn my
to
mic down a
the
little bit.
initiators of the conference and to all of the people who put thought and effort into their presentations and into their questions and have helped to make this a place where we have advanced a very important cause that's central to the times in which we're living. We have only 2 speakers for this session, and it's the only.
Oh, hang on. Philosophist says, Carlin, not to be off topic, but I really appreciated your tweet sharing that video highlighting what a hypocritical piece of shit Candace Owens is. Guys, Candace Owens has outdone her. Philosophist, I literally almost played that video on the stream today, but I just didn't want to get angry. Candace Owens has really outdone herself. Candace Owens apparently did a whole show calling a minor victim of sex trafficking and abuse essentially a whore because she wanted to defend Andrew Tate. Candace Owens, it's on my Twitter right now. It should be relatively close to the top because I haven't tweeted that much today. It's from here. I'll just show you guys. Hang on. Let me just get it up real quick. We're not gonna watch the video or anything. We're concentrating on this Antifa thing. But like, I was floored when I saw this video. I could not well, no, I could believe it. I could absolutely believe it. It's Candace Owens. Like, this is what she does. But where is it? Oh, where the heck is it? Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Found it. Let me show. So this is shared by our friend Heidi. And Heidi says Candace produces garbage content, defends child predators, and shames victims. Another excellent breakdown by Milk Bar TV. Shout out to Milk Bar TV, and I bet it's on their Twitter as well. Yep, it's at the Milk Bar TV. I will pop the link in the chat. They basically took Candace Owens to task, showing how she lied, showing how she obfuscated, all to protect Andrew Tate. Like, it is gross. We're talking like Candace is going after a girl that was, when she was a teenager, she was victimized. She like, well, what Candace is saying is that when this girl was a teenager, we're talking like 14, 15, 16 years old, she seduced a 57-year-old man, some men in their 40s, some men in their 30s, and Candace is blaming the girl who was an underage minor when the 57-year-old man had sex with her, and Candace is blaming the girl for seducing these innocent men, to the point where Candace didn't even use their names in the videos because she didn't want people to know that she was talking about a minor child that was being abused by men in their 50s. So yeah, it's really bad. I almost showed it on the stream today. I decided not to. Candace does hate women. I am convinced of it. She hates women. It's disgusting. And the fact that the Daily Wire is continuing to promote that garbage should tell you all you need to know about the good, God-fearing conservatives and how much they really care about protecting kids and grooming and all this stuff. They don't give an F. They don't give an F. Anyway, refocusing, Antifa conference at Hofstra University.
That has only 2 speakers. So in light of that, I'm going to utilize the privilege of the chair to make a few remarks of prologue to the session. So we have kind of a bookending here of a broad historical sweep, the 100th anniversary of the March on Rome, where the first self-identified fascist movement assumed power. And then we have the unfortunate confluence of an election next week in which proto-fascist forces, or 21st century fascist forces, as they were formulated in the conference call, actually have the possibility of
I
assuming
appreciate that, Taden. Thank
much
you.
more powerful positions in the politics of our country, threatening, in fact, the foundations of democratic rule in the country. So I think that this conference is particularly useful from both points of view and can draw on both. I think that we all know a good deal more now than we did just 2 years ago about pandemics. So I'm going
I can
to
do a bingo card. What
use
bingo card should I do?
a pandemic metaphor to
I don't know if I
describe
have
the
a good
moment.
one.
A pandemic is caused by some kind of
Maybe
a
we'll just do an Unwoke
viral
bingo card.
agent that spreads from person to person. And it's not just
There you go.
one type of virus, but something that perpetually evolves, and it evolves to become more transmissible. It goes from, and the variant of the virus that wins out is always the one that spreads most easily from one to the other. So I say as background, I particularly have to call out and give credit to Adolph Reed, who I thought gave a spectacularly powerful, analytical, and moving keynote address yesterday. And his point was about the class context in which fascism arises and functions. So if fascism were only a matter of madmen and billionaires, it would not be of very much interest because it would have no path to power. But fascism, in fact, is a system that is constantly evolving creating new variants. And the purpose of those variants is to infect larger and larger numbers of people on behalf of a program that reinforces the foundations of class society.
Oh shit.
So I'm
I didn't mean to do that. He just said that fascism like reinforces the notions of class society. Where does that come from? I think that's what he said. Fascism appeals to people. Hang on. I want to find where he says it appeals to the notions of a class society. Where does that come from? We develop therapeutics, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I think I missed it. Anyway. Oh, look, I can see member chats in here now. Well, this is great. Thank you, Jen, member of the channel for 3 months. Sure, we have fascism here, but it will become as an anti-fascism movement. Huey Long. Yes, class. Anytime you guys, thank you, Jen, for that. I appreciate it and for the ongoing support. Guys, anytime you hear about like class, that's going to be Marx because that's where Marx originally started, right? So anytime you hear about like differentiations in class, that goes back to Marx.
Appeal of fascism, to break the chain of transmission of fascist ideas.
Well, hang on. Rottweiler is kind of like, there are other people that talk about it too, but I always make the assumption that it's Marx because inevitably the people doing it are Marxists. So I make the assumption that that's like the original origin of it. Although, of course, Marx was not the only person talking about class.
And actions. So we have two panelists here today who are approaching, and fascism appeals to people both on the basis of their spiritual needs and of their material needs. So we have two panelists today who have prepared, I believe, very thoughtful presentations, not to give us all the answers, but to give us some real thought and to provoke a discussion and to provoke thinking and action that'll live on after the conference. So with that, I hope not too great a digression. I would like to introduce our first speaker, whose name is Kurt Stand. Kurt, you heard him at the microphone just a little while ago. He referred to his experience going back to the Jesse Jackson campaign, and I believe before that. So he's a longtime political activist and organizer, a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, and a moderator of Portside. Since I have mentioned Portside, let me tell you what that is. I'm also listed on the program as a moderator of Portside. If you don't know what it is, you can very easily find out by just going to that little search engine named Google and typing in Portside or type in portside.org. And it's an information system that is directed to helping people on the left navigate and discover what they need to know in the world today. Okay, and with that, I'll turn it over to Kurt.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Barry. Actually, that was a perfect introduction. And to clarify for nautical people or the lack of it, Portside's the left side, right? People should know that. I also want to thank Marianne and Fraser. I want to thank everybody who's been here. I don't agree with everything that everybody's said, but what's needed are forums in which people disagree with each other or are learning.
Did
from
you go
each
to
other, which is
Hofstra,
more
Tom
the
J?
point than agreeing or disagreeing. I mean, that's the value of this. Nobody wants to go to a conference where you know the next thing somebody's going to say once they say the first word. That's a waste of everybody's time. I also want to thank the staff who are working on this. It must be a little bit like herding cats, and in fact, I feel like
That's
having
okay,
them
everyday therapist.
come to our home and help
We all
us
have
herd
moments.
our cats who sort of run our household. So, but I do thank that. I thank them because I know how much work it is. So much appreciated. With that, let me get started. This clock there. Okay. Katharina Jacob was a German communist who was imprisoned in Ravensbrück, the concentration camp. She had been active from the 1920s through to the beginnings of the war. In a memoir, she survived, and in a memoir, she talked about being at a communist meeting, a women's meeting in the early 1920s. And one of the speakers said, "We do not only want to drink wine, we want to drink wine out of good goblets." And that's a principle here. That is that you want something similar to our bread and roses. We want the good things in life as well as the necessary things in life. And I want that thought to keep in mind. It's going to read an alternative quote from the 1930s about the mindset in the 20s. The day is empty, work is lacking, service is hard. The population needs stimuli. The Nazi paints them in the stuffy air as the populace wishes and capital commands. Workers of the brow hold out their hand, nothing else, to the worker of the fist. Big owners of small mining shares shout good luck, and that's all. To everyone else, behind the excesses of revenge, the portal of cliches, there always appears the same unstopped reality. Doctors have to make people healthy and productive for a hell. Cure diseases which always return from living conditions of modern society, like wounds in war. Lawyers dispense justice as a naked expression of violence. The fascist state tolerates them solely as butchers of a higher order. Nevertheless, petty bourgeois habit stands in the way of each of these insights. Nevertheless, a very small stratum of people with vested interest.
When we hear the words petty bourgeois, what do we think that comes from? Stephen B. just tuned in. Did anyone define fascism? I think they would find themselves looking in the mirror. Well, this is Stephen B. And thank you for the super chat. I do appreciate it. This is why we're watching this specific presentation, because there was like a dozen presentations, like a dozen Antifa presentations at this Antifa conference. And I want to know how they're actually defining fascism and what they think the problem is. But we aren't there yet. They haven't gotten to it. So we'll, I guess, hopefully find out in this presentation. So guys, every time we hear the term like petty bourgeois, what do we think in our heads? Akshay says Communist Manifesto. Yep, that's one of the things I would think. I would say more generally that I would think Marxism, socialism, communism, far, far, far left. There is no, if we're looking at it from a forensic linguistic perspective, which is basically like you identify words, how people use those words, what types of groups use those words, there is no group that uses the term petty bourgeois except for socialists.
Shapes a revolutionary situation in reactionary terms and makes use of those whom the 19th century called desperados. Nevertheless, too, however, the forces of reaction would never have been able to seduce people if their methods were not speckled and contradictory like the situation itself. The rational needs of today ultimately stem from the economic situation, but not so smoothly and simply, and therefore cannot be so smoothly and simply treated and remedied. For if there is not as much starved imagination as offended snobbery, economic interest, ignorance, and real deprivation amongst the pauperized strata, then it would have been impossible to conduct the revolution.
All right. Oh, that wasn't what I wanted. Sorry, Sin. Well, we'll actually look at Sin's petit bourgeois comes from French and means when the worker starts making money and becomes bougie, Carlin. And yes, only communists use it. Thank you, Sin. PETIT. Rottweiler says, I feel they are going to define fascism like Marcuse and Fieri did. Anything remotely right. Oh, well, yeah, I think so too. That's why he said port side at the beginning, and port side means left. Anything that's not left is fascism. Magic. But the reason I point out the word specifically, guys, and for those of you who are new to me, you might not know this. The reason that I point out these terms specifically is that I want you to be able to listen to the language and recognize the patterns in language that these people use, so that when you encounter it in the real world and someone says petit bourgeois, oh, they're a Marxist. Like, I want you to make that instant association. Or that's what they're talking about. They have a more far left perspective. Because yeah, that is actually how it is spelled, because that's how you spell it in French. But you know, Sin got the basic mise en scène if you will. But I want you to be able to recognize the term and know where it comes from when you encounter it in the real world, because you can tell someone's perspective and someone's political affiliation based on the language that they're using. This is called forensic linguistics. Forensic linguistics is literally what they used to catch the Unabomber. It was invented for that. And so we can use that to be able to identify what political groups are people associating with. It's just a matter of recognizing patterns when it comes up in language. I know I was not enunciating. Petit. I haven't spoken French in a very, very, very long time.
In such reactionary terms with God, Fuhrer, fatherland, and fireworks. Now, Ernst Bloch wrote this shortly in 1933 or 34, shortly after Hitler came to power. For those who don't know him, and I assume that's most people, he was a critical Marxist thinker, close supporter, but not a member of the Communist Party of Germany from the 20s through the 50s. After the Nazi defeat in World War II, he came back from multiple places of exile to return to East Germany, and he was a professor of philosophy in Leipzig. When openings for internal reform to reform the socialist system in a more democratic way were blocked, he went to the West.
Exactly,
and there
Vince.
he was
Well
an
done.
important influence on the West German New Left in the 60s and 70s, as well as a sideline, strong influencer of liberation theology, first in Europe and in Latin America. So that's who he was, but his particular importance lies in his concept of concrete utopia, that humanity from the birth of class society has striven for a world without oppression, a world of shared freedom and equality, and that such visions have inspired folk art, critical literature, music, theater, workers and peasants movements, and revolutionary movements throughout time. What's distinctive in this understanding, however, is the word concrete. For idle fantasies has little to do with his understanding of utopia. As a Marxist, he never lost sight of the class dynamics of history and how the oppressed can make use of those conditions, the
they're just saying the quiet part out loud, aren't they?
time to transform society and the world. But his critique of left-wing responses to the dangers of fascism in the 1920s, and it relates to today, is either people accepted an automatic progression of society that somehow things will work themselves out, that somehow the march of progress will go on, or they sank into revolutionary slogans that were less and less connected to the actual hopes, fears, and thoughts of people. That is, their rhetoric was disconnected. This, to be sure, the Nazis gained strength in the vacuum between those two, right? The core strength of the labor movement of communists and socialists in Germany and Weimar was not shaken, but there were millions of people who weren't part of that core strength, and the Nazis seized upon that. And what does this have to do with us? For the question before us is, how do we build a movement broad enough that's able to address the mass basis of fascism without abandoning principles of solidarity or the necessity of systemic transformation in our own society? In other words, how do we reach out without compromising who we are?
These people literally believe that if you're not Marxist, you are a fascist. I mean, really, like, it puts a lot of things in perspective, doesn't it? I mean, I think this is something we all know theoretically to be true. Like if you aren't on the furthest, okay, well, I asked about the sound earlier and people told me it was okay. So if people, John, are you wearing headphones? Like, I can't, okay, I can turn my mic down a little bit, but I can't turn it down much more because I need to be able to hear myself too, as it turns out. So what was I going to say? I think we know theoretically. The problem with the sound, guys, just so you know, is it sounds fine to me. It sounds fine. Okay, people are saying I shouldn't listen to John and I should turn my mic back up. All right. Sorry, John, you're just going to have to manage because other people are saying it was fine. So I think we know theoretically that this is true, that like if you are not on the furthest of the far left, then you're considered a fascist so far as they're concerned. But this is one of those times where they really did say the quiet part out loud, that like we're talking about Marxism, we're talking about the revolution, we're talking about all this, that, and the other thing, and everyone who opposes our Marxist revolution is fascist. Let's just keep that in mind. Rottweiler said malignant narcissists have dichotomous thinking. Well, yes, I think a lot of people have. I don't even think it's just, I wouldn't say it's just malignant narcissists, Rottweiler. I think that you don't have to be a malignant narcissist to have dichotomous thinking. In fact, most people who have dichotomous thinking are not malignant narcissists. So I think you are true that they do have that, but I think there are a lot of people that aren't malignant narcissists that have that as well. And to be real, guys, most people in the world are not malignant narcissists. Most people in the world are just selfish.
Right? Because they're both sides of that. When somebody says, let's meet them, somebody halfway, but let's not talk about racism, then you're defeating yourself. Right. So to pose this question directly, and this relates a little bit to the discussion earlier today. Harris Grumman is a staff member of the Service Employees Union, was backpacking in Utah, stops at a laundromat. And this is what he writes. An athletic young man came in with a basket of what looked like mostly toddlers' clothing. He was angry, banging things around, mumbling irritably. He was irritated. Not the most comforting companion, but I kept reading the paper. Then he began speaking for my benefit. He was on a political tirade about that B-word Hillary Clinton or our N-word president. I saw him clearly, close crop, blonde hair, late 20s, solid and trim. He was a veteran of Afghanistan and Iraq, 3 tours of duty in all, and now he was unemployed, doing the washing while his wife worked at Walmart. The Democrats only cared about transgendered people and immigrants. Trump was his choice. My uncle in Wyoming thinks we should kill President Obama. At that point, Grumman started paying attention.
One of the things I want to say, though, in regards to this is that for anyone who might be on the political, for anyone who and this usually ends up, I'm sorry, conservatives, this is usually you who do this. But like you can apply this to anyone who is not like on the far left. What I have seen developing over the last 3.5 years is that people on the political right are so tired of being called racist and fascist and all those things that they are actually starting to act like racists and fascists. They're starting to they're basically being like, you've been calling me a racist for years. Fine, I guess I'm a racist. I guess I'm gonna say racist things. Or you've been calling me a fascist for years. I'm gonna start acting like it. You've been calling me a transphobe for years. I'm gonna start acting like it. I'm just gonna start saying really anti-trans things, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think I need to say this to people who are regulars in my community, but I do need to say it in case anyone new is watching. That's a really bad effing idea. It's a really bad idea. Because every time, and I've seen the race stuff come up over and over and over again lately. Maybe it's just because I happen to be around a racist fucking libertarian Twitter account that just is going out of their way to be racist. But every single time you say racist things, like Matt Walsh saying that Black children are animals and have been raised by animals, because he has said that, that's really fucking racist. And every single time the right does those things, these people will say, see, we told you they're the racists that we always said that they were. They will use it against you every single time. Just because someone is calling, and this is why, the whole introduction to my book is called You Are Not a Racist. And if you haven't read my book, you can get a copy at activelyunwoke.com or on Amazon or any of those things. It's called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against woke insanity in your life. There's a link down there somewhere. The entire introduction is called You Are Not a Racist, because just because these people say you're a racist doesn't mean you actually need to internalize that. It is when you internalize what these people are saying, that's when you give them what they want and they end up winning. Remember, and I wrote about this on my Substack recently, they are trying to get you to react. They are trying to get you specifically to act racist by calling you a racist, because when you react, they will take that reaction and use it against you to say, we told you so, guys. We told you so, these horrible racist people. So you have to rein that in. There is absolutely no reason in the world that anyone should be shitting on Black people for being Black. There is no reason in the world why anyone should be calling Black people animals. There is no reason in the world why conservatives need to constantly be posting videos of Black kids getting in fights saying, look, we told you they're all the same, which they do all the effing time. And I say that because I promise you there are videos of white kids out there getting in fights that conservatives never post. They only post the effing Black kids. Why do you think they only post the Black kids? Because they're being overtly goddamn racist. Don't think people don't notice these things, because they do. And so it's incumbent upon us, because we are not in the power position. They are in the power position. They control everything. We have to play smart, because we can't be heavy-handed. Because when we come in heavy-handed, they win. We have to play smart. And it is not smart to go out and do overtly racist things, or overtly anti-trans things, or overtly anti-gay things, just to be able to say, well, you know, they said we were this anyway, so yeah. Like, that's exactly what the right is doing right now. And they are giving the left exactly what they want.
Or commented and talked him down. Turned out that when he says what he did, that he's a unionist, the guy said, oh, my father was a unionist. My father worked on the railroads, slightly a Democrat. And he says, I wish I had a union job. So Grumman's comment is, back in 2016, I met a face in the rioting white supremacist crowd of January 6, 2021. Yes, he was racist. Yes, he was resenting people worse off than himself.
There was no racism
yes, he
in
was
January
too
6th.
ready for murderous violence. But don't talk to him about white privilege. Get him a union job. Now, that's fair enough as far as it goes, but obviously it's not goes far enough. The other question we have to ask ourselves is, why was he ready to consider murderous violence and not ready to look for a way to organize a union? Why did he not look for left-wing groups? I mean, he found the right-wing groups on the web. Could have found left-wing groups, you know. So why? What's that manifested in? Where does that come from? Turn again to book. I won't quote all the time, but a few.
Queen Beth. Queen Beth, you spoil me so much, and I'm so appreciative. Thank you for the amazing super chat. Beth says, I just finished reading your book. Amazing. I want to make You Are Not a Racist bookmarkers and put them in every anti-racist bookstore. Exactly. That's one of the suggestions I had in the book. Now I'm going to read the hard copy and highlight what I'm doing. What I'm doing. I'm not sure exactly what that means, Beth, but thank you. I really do appreciate it. Oh my gosh. Yeah, guys, if you want a copy of my book, you can find it on Amazon. There's a hardcover version, there's a Kindle version, there's an audio version read by me. And maybe we'll do a book club. I haven't done an actively Unwoke book club in a while, but maybe we'll do one coming up and we can talk about it. I worked really hard on it. It's basically like an intro to like all the things I wish I had known when I got into this. And of course, like I wrote it in 2021, right? So I wrote that book 2.5 years ago. So like so much of my thinking has evolved since then. It's not that anything in the book is wrong, because it's not wrong, but it's just like I've gone so much deeper than when I initially wrote the book that I probably need to write another book. I just don't know if I'm ready to write another book, if I'm honest about it. But thank you, Beth. I really do appreciate it.
So he says, not all people exist in the same now.
And guys, when you read my book, if you read my book, please post a review on Amazon. I don't remind people to do that enough. It really does help out if you post a review on Amazon. 5 stars only. If you have anything less than 5 stars, keep it to yourself. But post a review on Amazon, post a review on Goodreads. That would be really appreciative. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
They do so externally by the fact that they're all seen today. But that does not mean they were living in the same time with others. Rather, they carry earlier things with them, things which are intricately involved. Times older than the present continue to affect older strata. Here it's easy to return to dreams of one's way back to older times. The strength of this untimely course has become evident. It promised nothing less than new life, despite its looking to the old. Even the masses flock to it, since the unbearable now at least seems different with Hitler, who paints good things for everyone. There is nothing more unexpected, nothing more dangerous than this power being at once fiery and puny, right? And it's an important combination, because if people felt they had power, they would not be doing this, right, with the militias or any of this. The workers are no longer alone with themselves and the bosses. Many earlier forces from a different below are beginning to slip between, right? And that was the roots in Bloch's understanding of why fascism was taking off in the post-World War I, whereas it hadn't, that kind of mass reaction had not been as strong a factor. It actually was here, but not in continental Europe at the time. And here's the difference. The labor movement, in all of its iterations, the left maintains and builds on a sense of history of past victories, defeats, sacrifices that brought it to its present. Yet it also, and critically, is a movement that consistently looks to the future. In fact, it's one of its defining features. One can almost see class consciousness, and I know it's a stretch here for cultural studies people, but it's a form of modernism, in my opinion. Okay, but I like Proust. Yeah, but it's a form of modernism. That is a search for a possible future, not a buried past. Think of the words of the Internationale. No more traditions change shall bind us. Arise, ye slaves, no more in thrall. The earth shall rise on new foundations. We have been naught, we shall be all. Or solidarity forever, right? We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old. Forward thinking. We're breaking from the past. Doesn't mean that there isn't a sense of history, but we're breaking from the past. Millions, however, including those who suffer from capitalism and war, sought instead for status and
suffer from capitalism, including those who suffer from capitalism and war. He actually prioritized capitalism over war.
Authority within a society that was gone. The Nazis confronted workers striving to create the world renewed.
Well, he's a college professor, Indiana. What do you want?
The mass base for reaction lay within middle class sections of the nobility who had lost a sense of economic status in the social dislocation after the war. Soldiers unable to return to civilian life after 4 years of fighting. People from lost territories. Germany lost a lot of territory. After World War I, people were displaced. Peasants were being forced off the land because the Junkers had lost some of their wealth and power. All of these were existing within the unbearable now. And so many turn to Hitler, who paints those good old things for everyone. A society that's hierarchical but stable, in which everyone had their place and knew where they stood, right? Your trade, your land, your work, what you value, right? And a society that was insular and not welcoming to strangers who could be agents of change and disruption, and a past in which a seemingly benevolent authoritarianism bound all together against the rest of the world. It's the mass base of it. And we can see something analogous here in the States right now. And so what the vision of what socialism could create, right? Collective ownership of the means of production is stable life, but also things like freedom for women, for Jews, for colonial subjects, is exactly what the Nazis contested, as is every mass-based right-wing movement that appeals to an envisioned future, not an imagined past. Bloch terms these differences as synchronous and non-synchronous contradictions, and I apologize, those are his words and the translations don't make it much easier. But that means contradictions emerging of the time, that is rooted in the genuine conflicts within contemporary society. And then for us, that's neoliberal and global capitalism. It's emerging from our reality, right? And through which an alternative society based on justice can emerge as distinct or opposed to a consciousness rooted in past social formations, out of step with future possibilities that's embedded in present realities, and through which a politics of hate can be manipulated for real possibilities within the present are rejected, right? We don't see that, right? I don't want solar power. I want to go back to a world that doesn't exist. I want a Tennessee Valley Dam because that's what worked for my grandfather, or whatever the equivalent might be, right? So, yes, and I will spare you another lengthy quote from Bloch, but yes, but the key thing is the anger, right? But he does say for that reason, right? The antithesis, well, the immiserated classes that live alongside these two conditions, this contradiction from the past and the present, does not allow for an elaborated present class consciousness of its own. For that reason, it makes the thrust of the conflict external and blunt, directed only against the symptoms, not against the core of exploitation. And that's exactly what you have happening. And I mentioned I was a unionist. I once was this Unilever, had a long conversation. Are we for or against the company? Well, people had an ambiguous attitude because after all, the company, that was the products they made. They took pride in going to work every day and making something. So while they didn't like management, they were in their time, right? Whereas if I look at everything as out of me, no, I want to push it away. I want to react against it. And that's really the nub of what's going on. Okay. So that legitimate frustration with society without direction opens the door for violent rage. And that clearly is what marks that guy in the laundromat. My life could have been different. Society has gone to hell, right? I mean, that's kind of, so the appeal of an unreachable kind of freedom, right? I want to be free. I like the movie Easy Rider, marking my time, right? Right. But Peter Fonda. Okay, go for it. Right. But the appeal of the reachable kind of freedom based on suppression and equality, right, proclaimed by the right wing.
Hang on, I got another super chat from Beth. Thank you. I watched Jordan Peterson interviewing Vivek. I think we should watch it on this channel. Dr. Peterson was like finally a candidate that articulates his intentions. He actually has a vision. Maybe we'll do that, Beth. That's a good idea. I'll take a look at it. You guys know I'm like Vivek is the only Republican candidate that I would actually vote for. I think that nominating Vivek would be the smartest thing that the GOP has ever done, which is exactly why they won't do it. But like he's by far the best candidate so far as I'm concerned. And you don't have to be sorry at all. You're Queen Beth of the chat. You never have to apologize. And thank you again for the super chat.
Of supporters of Trump is based on a misreading of the past. And it's a way of thinking out of sync with the times. And that's protocols of Zion, QAnon, the replacement theory that somehow whites are being displaced by immigrants and blacks who aren't immigrants, obviously, in the contemporary sense, but logic doesn't matter, right? And this is the critical insight for Bloch. This appeal to a supposed past serves only in a reactionary way to hold up to the present as a past, which is genuinely not dead, right? So it's a rebellion against alienation, right? So contrary to fascist past or present, though, this rebellion can bring back positive positions of a pre-capitalist notion. That is to say, we can, and the environmental movement is very good about this, right? We can have a notion of being at one with the earth. We can have a notion of labor with value. We can have
Hang on, we got another super chat coming in. There it is from broker Natalie. I hope you're doing well, Natalie. Putting you on the big screen in the bubble of healing trailer here in Havasu. Fabulous out here as long as I have Wi-Fi and can hear you, sweet pea. Thank you, Natalie. I hope your travels are going well. The picture you posted on the lake was absolutely beautiful. And thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate it.
a notion of community just not that community, because it has to be in keeping with the needs and the times. That is, without an appeal to reactionary myths that manipulate
Oh,
fear and
really? That'll be
isolation,
fun.
but in conjunction with the
I
labor
love
movement
Marianne. I do.
that's working to build towards that possible future. And it was the failure to make such yearnings explicit in the context for political activism that contributed to the failure of the left during the Weimar period. They were comfortable within their base. It was a bigger base than what we have. But in a sense, we have millions of people who generally have a progressive, socially oriented point of view. But if you don't appeal beyond that, the other side can win with a minority of support, but millions in that minority, right? Not a small minority. But that has to be rooted in the objective conditions of the time. These elements in US society or in Germany were always there, right? There's nothing, we've had fascist militias in this country as far back as you want to go, whether in the persona of the American Legion, the Black Legion in the 30s,
The American
the
Legion
Minutemen,
is
the John Birch
fascist?
Society, but they take on a particular kind of threat at the present, right?
Who are they?
And that has to go to the structure of matters.
Who are
And
the
that's sort of
fascists?
what Adolf Reed was talking about yesterday too, although I'm not as pessimistic as he is, as I told some people last night. But that means understanding that also, right? So if you don't appeal, if you lose that notion, you're limited to yourself and you allow the other side to get in. And one of the important things to remember here is other possibilities always exist to the crisis of a system, right? It was not inevitable, and after World War I, that Germany would adopt even a more expansionist, militarist, chauvinist society than what had existed. From about 1918 to 1924, other possibilities
Yeah, I just want to point out Akshay's chat. The Weimar Republic failed because it was inherently socialist, founded by the Socialist Democrats. They just didn't want a violent revolution like the Bolsheviks. Exactly, Akshay. Thank you.
existed. The working class movement was predominant, right? It won tremendous gains. It was divided amongst itself. Anybody knows the history knows that. But nonetheless, it kept on moving. It was hopeful. It was forward thinking. And you know what? The middle class, therefore, adopted more democratic possibilities, right? The middle class liberal democratic parties were accepting of Weimar, right? The sections of the business class at that point were willing to accept the Versailles Treaty. They didn't like it, but they accepted the new realities. That is the hegemony of the working class movement, changed the political culture within the society. Certainly there was, murderous rage, countless assassinations, right? Armed struggles in which workers lost more often than they won. But that was in the shadows. The right wing did not have a mass movement able to move those millions of people in the middle. But after the mid-20s, the working class movement, you can only be defeated so often in direct combat, and lost initiative. And then the initiative was taken up by the other side. So it's who's being forward-looking, who's building out, that's able to combat fascism, able to combat neo-fascism. The only way we will defeat what Trump represents.
Why does Trump represent fascism?
And that also was because and this is why, and it was all of Europe eventually fell into the sway of fascism, more or less. I mean, there were a couple of countries. By 1939, by the end of the war, almost all of Europe was under a right-wing government.
So I just want to note, I think we are starting to coalesce around a definition of what these people think fascism is, which is Donald Trump. No, he just said that basically Trump is the modern day incarnation of all things fascist. So I think we're getting there, Gray One.
Government and proto-fascist or authoritarian governments ruled almost the entire continent. So it's also, analogous, unfortunately, to today. But
exactly, the other Jenny. Exactly, that's why.
Capital felt that it had no
capitalism.
Way out.
You know what? I kind of want to make a t-shirt that says capitalism is fascist. And just says that. Capitalism is fascist. Because if I make that t-shirt, it would both be part of the subversive series where it's like revealing the true meaning of words. But it's also like, if I made a t-shirt that says capitalism is fascist, people wouldn't know which side I was on. They wouldn't know if I was like pro-capitalism is fascist or like anti-capitalism is fascist. Wouldn't that be I fucking love making these designs that, like, if you're really smart, you have absolutely no idea which side I'm on because it can be read multiple different ways. I'm gonna work on that later. I'm not making that up.
which is also why it sought that solution of fascism, right? That for whatever reasons, correct or incorrect in their analysis, right? And one of my favorite quotes from Gramsci, who, as we've
Exactly.
talked about too much, is,
Exactly. Just like the
the
Trump
ruling class isn't
indictment
always
shirt.
right, right? They might have been able to solve the crisis through more liberal methods, but they didn't understand that. And so they went to the solution because they felt there was a crisis. There was no way to get out of the crisis of the Depression. And therefore they turned to the Nazis, and the rest is history. So what about us? It takes place over a longer arc. But from the mid-1970s with the US defeat in Vietnam, 5 more minutes. I see the time. Yes. So, we had, corporate neoliberalism and corporate globalization were the response of the system to rising to the New Deal and to the civil rights and anti-war movement. That was their response. And in their response, they were, it took a while, right? Disrupted the movements. Reagan becomes president, but Reagan wasn't wholly successful, right? And the rainbow that I talked about
Was Reagan
was part of
fascist
the
as well?
answer. So we didn't eliminate public education. We didn't eliminate Medicare. We didn't eliminate
God,
Social Security.
Wouldn't it be
Unions so
great if he had
decimated
eliminated
remain
public
a force.
education?
That's why the right was ultimately dissatisfied with Reagan, right? He failed. As much as we suffered from him, it failed. Thus, the push for greater repression today to finish the job that he was unable to do. 2 more quotes. So, all right. So let me there are 2 other things. One, I have a long quote here, which I won't use, from Jack Odell, who was a leader of the Black Freedom Movement, and also, importantly, learned his politics from the National Maritime Union when it was a left-wing union, and he was a sailor within it. But he talked about how from the mid-50s through 1969, the civil rights anti-war movement created an alternative power within society. That was then lost, but it was a movement based on multiple centers of resistance, organized throughout the country, that did not lose sight of its goals and kept on, and therefore changed the parameters of society. Mid-1970s, it loses momentum. We have Carter, we have Reagan, but then the rainbow forms, and the rainbow, and this I do want to quote, just Sheila Collins wrote this history of the rainbow at the time, though. I mean, she was active in it. And she talks also about a sense of history, because this we also have lost. History is our own, not theirs, right? And when we concede that, we give up too much. She writes, the Constitution, and this was the outlook of Jesse, I mean, and the whole movement, right? Also the whole civil rights movement in its dominant phase. The Constitution itself is a product of heroic struggle against hereditary privilege and imperialism. As such, it incorporates the most revolutionary notions known to humanity, principles of equality, dignity of all human beings, and their inalienable right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The contradiction at the heart of U.S. history is that to guard their own privilege, the founding fathers who enshrined those principles were not prepared to apply to everyone, but limited to white property-owning men. But that ideal has fueled every struggle. And what the Rainbow Coalition and what every freedom movement since suggests is that those principle of inalienable rights must now become universal. Compromises were always a violation of the original norm. And that also has a spiritual component, because it also grew up out of dissenting Protestantism, right? From the Anabaptists on to the Levelers. It also had its roots in the Black church, obviously. It also had its roots in critical thinking, and I won't write the influence of the Enlightenment and the more radical side of it. And so all those roots are ours to use. But all those roots also mean a way of talking about freedom, which is the common core, right? And you see, it was the Black freedom movement, right? The labor movement fights for freedom. But we have to redefine freedom so that everyone sees themselves within it. And I more than talked too long, so I will now shut up. But
Thank you. I want to hear the other lectures.
Thank you, Kurt. So for those who don't know how conferences work, when we have a panel, first we have all the speakers, and then we have the questions that can be addressed to everybody and comments as well. So I hope that Kurt's talk stimulated questions and comments on your part. Please don't lose them, hold them, and you'll have an opportunity in just a minute. Our second speaker is Deborah Spencer. Deborah is an economist and is the chair of the economics department at Emory and Henry College. The title of her talk is Liberalism and the Counter-Resistance in the United States, Reflections on the Public-Private Distinction.
Can we just talk about the irony for a second of having a professor of economics do a talk at a conference where it's going to be her job to define what fascism is and the problem of fascism, and it is completely likely that this professor of economics, who is the chair of her department at the university that she works for, is, well, not going to like capitalism all that much and will probably be an advocate for, overthrowing it entirely and having a Marxist revolution, because that just makes total economic sense.
Yep.
Hope she has slides. You know, like a giant picture of Karl Marx or something. Oh, no.
Okay. Wow. I guess you can hear me. Thank you. I want to join in the chorus of everyone singing your praise for putting this together, Marianne and Fraser, and all the support that is behind the scenes, getting us clickers and doing all the things we need to make this a success. My name is Deborah Spencer. I come here as an economist, and I'll apologize for that in just a second.
As you
first, I just wanted
should.
to say that I have not spent my entire career studying fascism. But I have spent my time studying capitalism and worrying about capitalism, especially about
It was within 2 sentences of her beginning to speak that she talks about how much she worries about capitalism as an economist. Can we just listen to that again? I'm sorry. That was just so beautiful. It was I mean, listen, we all knew it was coming, all right. I have spent my time worrying about capitalism.
To make this a success. My name is Deborah Spencer. I come here as an economist, and I'll apologize for that in just a second. But first, I just wanted to say that I have not spent my entire career studying fascism. But I have spent my time studying capitalism and worrying about capitalism, and especially about how it has transformed people, human beings, right, into robots. And
What are the 4 goals of the woke left? For those who are new, I am going to make you memorize the 4 goals of the woke left, and they relate back directly to what this woman just did. I as an economist, I have just spent a lot of time worrying about capitalism, and capitalism takes human beings and turns them into robots. That's what she just said. Professor, university. The 4 goals of the woke left are: gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. because the ultimate, the biggest enemy, the grandest enemy that the woke left is fighting is not white people, it's capitalism. They want to overthrow the system of capitalism. Everything they do is designed to poke holes in capitalism. I was interviewing I no no, I was on Larry Sharp's show the other day, and I hope you guys get a chance to go watch that interview because it was a great chat. And Larry was talking about how when he was a Marine, they showed them interrogation videos of, I think, from they're like, yeah, from one of the wars. Was it like Vietnam? I think it was from Vietnam, because they showed them interrogation videos of like POWs that were being interrogated by communists. And essentially, the POW said, "You're never going to convince me to embrace communism. Like, capitalism is great. When I go home, I'm going to be a war hero. It's going to treat me just fine." And the communists said, "No, no, 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 no. That's not what we're doing. It's not to get you to embrace communism. It's to essentially plant seeds of doubt. Just plant seeds of doubt about capitalism." And that's the same thing that these people are. North Korea. You're right, George. North Korea. I apologize. North Korea. um, that's what these people are doing. When this woman, economics professor, chair of her department at her university, speaking at Hofstra University, when this woman comes up and says, "I'm an economist, and I just spend so much time worrying about capitalism because capitalism is turning human beings into robots." What she is doing is planting a seed of doubt about capitalism. And they just keep planting these seeds over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Oftentimes, what they do before they attack capitalism is they actually cause problems that will destabilize the system so that they can then blame blame capitalism for the destabilization. So, for example, like during the pandemic, when they did $2 billion worth of property damage, when they were having fiery but mostly peaceful protests, right? That was entirely designed to destabilize the system. And then what did they blame on that destabilization? Capitalism. None of that would have ever happened without capitalism. The Chaz in Seattle never would have happened if it weren't for the evils of capitalism. Capitalism caused all of this stuff. Therefore, capitalism must be the problem. Planting the seeds, planting the seeds, planting the seeds, planting the seeds, planting the seeds. That is the entire goal. Every crazy thing the left does, from the big, loud things like the mostly peaceful protests to the quiet things like the lectures at Hofstra University, where you have an economist saying, "I just worry about capitalism because it just turns human beings into robots." That's quiet, okay? But it's all still planting seeds because ultimately they cannot achieve their Marxist revolution as long as capitalism stands in their way. Capitalism is everything these people hate. Capitalism upholds individualism and meritocracy. They want collectivism and equity. Collectivism and equity is the polar opposite of individualism and meritocracy. Everyone on board?
And how we have pulled people out of community and put them into little boxes of rational thinkers. And so as I was
Hang on, I got a great super chat from Rottweiler. "It's not capitalism that turned people into robots. By Marcuse's admission in Essay on Liberation, the goods of capitalism create a stable middle class, which is conservative and counter-revolutionary. No revolutionary energy." Well, excuse me, Rottweiler, that's another reason why they hate capitalism, right? Because capitalism creates a stable middle class, which is conservative and counter-revolutionary. These people can't have a stable middle class. These people don't even believe the middle class exists. They believe it's the bourgeois and the proletariat, right? So it's another reason they hate it. I appreciate the super chat. Thank you very much. And then Andre says, "Capitalism also upholds private property rights." Yes, it does. Fair point.
thinking, so when I saw the call for this conference, I was actually on sabbatical, thinking about the public-private distinction, and trying to put together, I guess, my final tome as an academic. I'm more at the end of my career than the beginning. And the public-private distinction to me is kind of at the heart of what we're seeing happening, which is, to me, the theft of the public, who we are as people, and what we have accessible to us. And that's being filtered into the private sector, into the hands today, that would be of white men who are CEOs of large institutions. And
By private sector, she means the bourgeois. That's what they mean. The bourgeois, the bosses, the property owners, the landlords, the people who control the power structure. And she just said, they're all white men. They're all white men. Well, whiteness doesn't mean skin color. Whiteness means capitalism. It means the private property owner.
it seems to me that when I think about what really is crucial to attack in econ, and what I even talked to my introductory macro students about, it's solving three basic crises, right? The socioeconomic crisis of the massive maldistribution of income.
Hang on. Going Stealth says, since I'm not rich, I'm proletariat. Not necessarily. Do you own a home? If you own a home, you're considered to be bourgeois. You're not considered to be proletariat. Or, I mean, they might make exceptions because they'll say something like, well, you're just existing within the system of capitalism and you're just doing what you need to do to survive within the system of capitalism. But eventually you're not even going to want to own that home. You will own nothing and you will be happy. But if you own your own home, if you own a business, if you are like a CEO, if you own land, if you are a landlord, oh yeah, you're not considered to be proletariat. Or you might be petit bourgeois, as we covered earlier.
We've grown into more and more financially unstable society, and obviously our environmental crisis is at a peak. And I always use a book and intro that looks at all three of these issues. And I start my class by saying to students, we're not socially stable, we're not financially stable, we're not environmentally stable. You've got a lot of work to do. So it gives the next generation a good job.
How is this, pop quiz for the chat, how is this slide an example of the ironclad law of woke projection? Because it is very clearly and obviously an example of the ironclad law of woke projection. Oh, look at this. Queen Beth of the chat is engaging in capitalism today. Thanks to capitalism, I found a coin in my recent purchase worth $1,000. Beth is a renowned coin collector. She has a great collection. Congratulations on that find, Beth. That's great. So the ironclad law of woke projection is essentially they will always tell you what they think and what they're doing because they will blame it on you. Anything they say about you is something that they themselves are doing. And on this slide right here is the ironclad law of woke projection in action. And yes, Reagan with the gold star. So I'm gonna take this chat down for a second, Reagan. Look at this slide. If fascism loves crisis, it is surely heading our way. Well, we know, based on the 4 goals of the woke left, which are gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia, we know that the woke left love destabilizing things, and destabilization means they love causing problems or causing a crisis. So they're destabilizing things. It is the left that is constantly and perpetually destabilizing things. Exactly, Fish Addict. Marxism loves a crisis, which is why they're saying, oh, capitalism, fascism, they love a good crisis, don't they?
But it also, this kind of drowns me in concern. And so I entered this conference with a sense of dread about what are we going to do? What are economists supposed to do? How are we going to move beyond this? A good question from earlier. But I also am thinking about this more and more. So for me, this conference kind of added another lane to what I was already doing. And I thank you all for all that you shared so far. I've learned a lot. But the extra lane is thinking about how do we go about reclaiming what I feel has been stolen, and that's part of the anti-fascist movement, I believe. But it's also part of rethinking capitalism, right? And so,
why do we need to rethink
I
capitalism?
guess I'll start here, and my apology here is that I think economists have had a big role.
Isn't it kind of funny in a presentation called Fascism and like the appeal of this presentation is literally called, you can see it at the top of the screen, The Appeal of Fascism. Why are they talking so much about capitalism and the dangers of capitalism and rethinking capitalism in a presentation called The Appeal of Fascism?
To play and creating these disasters. Now, I do want to point out that I'm not a traditional economist, and I hope you feel that way by the time this is over. But it's neo, and someone mentioned earlier yesterday that being anti-fascist meant being anti-capitalist, and I'd like to just qualify that a little bit, because I believe
What?
being anti-fascist means being anti-free market capitalist. That there is liberal capitalism, managed capitalism that is possible. We've gone beyond it, and we've been beyond it for 40 years. And I guess the question,
Being anti-fascist means being anti-free market capitalist? All right. I haven't done this in a while, but I need to make a clip of that right effing now. Hang on, let me get my whole setup in order. I apologize. I wasn't expecting her to say that particular quiet part quite so out loud as what she said. Oh my lord. Okay. Let me get my little clippy clip tool up and running, and we're going to make a clip of this real quick. Thank you guys for allowing me this latitude.
I guess I'll start here. And my apology here is that I think economists have had a big role to play in creating these disasters. Now, I do want to point out that I'm not a traditional economist, and I hope you feel that way by the time this is over. But it's neo, and someone mentioned earlier yesterday that being anti-fascist meant being anti-capitalist, and I'd like to just qualify that a little bit, because I believe being anti-fascist means being anti-free market capitalist. That there is liberal capitalism, managed capitalism that is possible. We've gone beyond it, and we've been beyond it for 40 years. And I guess the question I've been wrestling with myself, and maybe we can talk about later, is it possible to go back to that type of system where you have a more liberal democracy, managed capitalism, or do we have to go beyond that? So I started thinking.
All right, got my clip. Hang on, let me just make sure it saves. Like, I mean, come on. Literally saying the effing quiet part out loud. All right, I got it. I have never heard them be that blatant before. Where it's like they're not, and this is a lesson for you guys, because what I've been hearing from a lot of conservatives when I talk about capitalism and is they're like, well, Carlin, crony capitalism is a problem and blah 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 blah. And I'm kind of always like, I'm like, you're right. Crony capitalism is a problem, but we can't label everything free market because most people don't know what that means. We have to play the game within like the language that people understand, right? People don't understand what free markets mean. So we can't just say like free market capitalism because most people have no idea what that means, right? We just have to say capitalism and let it effing ride, because even crony capitalism is better than Marxism It's not perfect. We need to fix problems. I'm not saying there aren't problems, but my point is this. I have never heard one of these people, an economist no less, say that to be an anti-fascist, you have to be anti-free market capitalism. Thank you, Hofstra University, for this amazing gift that you've given us today.
About neoliberalism by going back to Adam Smith, and just thinking about how in that world of classical liberalism, we separated the public sphere and the private sphere. And so I've just kind of laid that out as neatly as I could. And what Adam Smith said really in The Wealth of Nations, this is 1776, is that really the government really only has three duties, three little things, right? He said national defense, law and order, and he said public goods. I threw in here some regulation is justified because I don't think if Adam Smith came back today, I don't think he'd be voting Republican. He talked a lot about
I don't know about that.
regulating banks, and he said if you regulate a bank, sure, it's going to impose restrictions. It's going to reduce the freedom of the banker.
Exactly,
But,
Alexa.
he said,
Managed capitalism equals government run.
If the freedom of everyone else is enhanced because of that, then it's worth it. So he kind of threw on a cost-benefit analysis when it came to thinking about regulation. And so, in the Adam Smith world, you've got a market economy. That's the private sector. That's where you have private interest and self-interest, right? And you have production for profit, right? And Adam Smith argued that you can leave the private sector alone because he assumed competition. And this is huge as we move down the road here. Competition is lots of small producers. And for Adam Smith, competition was the regulator in society. And this is why you didn't need government, right? If I wanted to be a jerk of a boss and pay you all starvation wages, I simply couldn't do it because I'd have competitors. You would be able to walk out and get a job elsewhere, okay? And so that's why you can get to a conclusion that you can have a stable civil society without government because you've got competition, right? And that's important as we move forward because we start to lose competition in our economy, right? I just read that something like 75% of the organizations we deal with are now big conglomerates, right? And so you have this notion of freedom and choice in that private sector as well, okay? For this bottom line here is a quote from The Wealth of Nations for Adam Smith: consumption is the sole end and purpose of all production. And when you think about that for a second, it seems like a simple little sentence. But
she's saying that Adam Smith is a communist.
What that means is that production for profit, production is about people consuming. It's about providing a economic system that gives people, right, the means that they need to survive, to consume. And so if there's an economic problem, then it has to be a problem of too little consumption. And that takes us to a discussion of distribution, right? And yet what we're going to find in a minute is that economists completely got rid of talking about distribution, okay? Okay. One last piece from Smith. He was a moral philosopher as well, okay? He wrote A Theory of Moral Sentiments. He edited it 5 times. I'm from Virginia, if you can't hear. And he only edited The Wealth of Nations once. So you see where his heart was, right? He added to his philosophy this idea of a moral compass. And he said, look, I've assumed competition. If you found yourself in a situation where there wasn't really a lot of competition, you would not take advantage of that, right? Because we all have a moral compass, and you simply wouldn't, screw your neighbor because you simply had the chance to do that, right? So unlike today's corporations, right, where if you've listened to any of the debate recently about what is causing inflation, right, what you see is that these companies, look at
Wait,
corporate profits for the
there's a debate about what's causing inflation. Pop quiz for the chat. What caused inflation? The inflation that we're experiencing right now? Does anyone have any ideas for all the non-economists in the chat? I have an idea of what caused the inflation that we're experiencing. I have some thoughts. Does anyone else have thoughts about what caused, like, I didn't know this was actually a debate. Yeah, printing effing money. Printing money. Printing money. Printing money. Printing money. Printing money. Why does everyone in my chat know what caused inflation? And the economist, who is the chair of her department and speaking at Hofstra University, doesn't know what caused inflation.
2021 year, right? They're historically high, and they're higher than any of their costs have risen themselves. So they've taken full advantage to use the increased costs that we have seen, mostly due to the supply chain to coronavirus, and they've jacked up their profits even more, right? This is something Adam Smith said we wouldn't do, right? So I guess part of the discussion can be, where is our moral compass today, right? So then when I think then about what was the effect of classical Adam Smith on neoclassical theory, and I'm getting, the next step is to get to neoliberalism, right? We see in economics this kind of revolution in thought around 1870. Three different guys in Europe wrote a paper where they took Adam Smith's like 1,000 pages of writing. He wasn't a mathematician.
Can I just make like a side note? Like, can I have a point of personal privilege? There was a time in my life when I wanted to be a university professor. There was. I thought that would be cool. I actually used to adjunct. I adjunct for several different universities just to, like, get teaching experience and all that crap. And it sucked. Adjuncting sucked real bad. But I still had in the back of my mind that someday, when I was ready to settle down, I would go get a job teaching at a university, and it would be really nice, and I could get work with students and, like, spend my time sharing my knowledge with the world and all this stuff, shaping young minds. And I've slowly had to come around to the notion that there is no way in this effing universe that I will ever be a university professor, because my politics are not far left. And that's really upsetting to me. I really wanted to do that at some point, and I just don't think it's ever going to happen. And it's one of those things, like, I suppose, like, when you're a kid and all you want to do is grow up and play in the NBA or something, but you're only like 5'6" and you're white, which means you can't really play basketball. At some point, you have to come to the realization that you're just never going to be in the NBA. It wasn't in the cards, not in this lifetime. And I'm slowly but surely coming to the realization that I'm never going to get to be a professor. Never going to happen. Got this whole PhD for nothing. What can you do? Yeah, I'm a professor of the internet. I'm a professor of the internet.
And they made mathematical formulas for it, right? And so economics becomes maximizing profits, right? Subject to your inputs.
Hang on, we got a super chat from Naruto. Off topic, the more I think about it, the more I think HG Tudor's analysis of Jordan Peterson would be interesting. So apparently Naruto's keeping me updated. I haven't really been paying attention to him lately, but apparently HG Tudor is, like, doing some sort of polling thing for his next Tudor scope or whatever the hell. And apparently Jordan Peterson, I really still want him to do Candace Owens, but apparently Jordan Peterson is on the list. I actually would like to know what he thinks about Jordan Peterson. So I do think that would be interesting, Naruto. So I guess if I can't get Candace Owens and James O'Keefe, I really want him to analyze James O'Keefe. But I guess Jordan Peterson would still be interesting. Fine. Thank you, Naruto, for the super chat.
It becomes constrained maximization, and efficiency becomes the target of economics. Everything's about efficiency. Okay. I say that Adam Smith's philosophy turns into ideology at this point, because an ideology is a little more nefarious, right? At least in my mind. So why do I say this? By the late 1800s.
Thank you, Beth. I
um,
appreciate it.
We've already got incredible concentration in our economy. We've already got the Sherman Antitrust Acts, right? We've already got J.P. Morgan and Carnegie and all those robber barons. They've already got their stuff, and yet we suddenly have this new theory in econ that goes back and grabs all the assumptions from Adam Smith. Well, let's assume a world of small little producers and harmony because everyone has a moral compass. And so it really, when you think about the evolution of thought in econ, this is really a justification for not interfering in a situation where we've already created a bunch of super elites with all the power. And so also then in this turn in econ theory, coercion becomes, or the state becomes the coercive source. If you go back to Adam Smith for a second and think about it, right? Despite what we say,
the state becomes the coercive source. Coercion is now defined by presence or absence of government. Where is she going here? Fish Addict says, I think Jordan Peterson's analysis of H.G. Tudor, wouldn't that be funny? Fish Addict, wouldn't that be funny? Wouldn't it be funny if H.G. Tudor did an analysis of Jordan Peterson and then Jordan Peterson, as retribution, did an analysis of H.G. Tudor? Oh! Can we please make that happen? Of course we can't make that happen. There aren't enough people here to make that happen. But man, that would be so beautiful, because if like H.G. Tudor actually analyzes Jordan Peterson as a narcissist, and by the way, I'm not actually sure I think Jordan Peterson is a narcissist, but let's just like go down that road for a second. Like if he actually did, Jordan Peterson would probably be really pissed off for H.G. Tudor to have done that. And so it wouldn't be like out of the realm of possibility for Jordan Peterson to retaliate, although he'd probably do it in a really kind of droll, like he's writing tweets in haiku now, which is weird. I kind of respect the weirdness, to be honest. Like I'm not opposed to it. I like weird as much as the next person, but like, man, that would be so great. Great idea. Great idea, Fish Addict.
Say, despite the idea that the private sector was a realm of freedom, right? Under Adam Smith's world, right, coercion came from your competitor, right? If you didn't do things well, right, your competitor could throw you out of business.
Beth, did you know that Jordan Peterson retweeted me yesterday? I was very proud of that. I had never gotten a Jordan Peterson retweet before. I was pretty happy about it. And he actually retweeted something important too, which I was really... He retweeted my post about that law in California that's going to put people in jail for speaking out at school board meetings.
Because you would just have to close down. So there was a lot of a coercion in the economy. It just was coming not from the state. It was coming from the guy with the restaurant next door to yours, right? In that form of competition. But what we've done with neoclassical theory now is basically move all coercion into the realm of the state. And we've acted as if, therefore, the economy is the realm of freedom, right? And so anytime we're then shifting resources or power from the public sector into the private sector, it is thought of as moving from coercion into freedom, right? And the language is important. I think one of the things I've been thinking a lot about, and I keep hearing here, is our rhetoric is important. And it has to be part of the strategy, I think, for moving beyond where we are. Here's the same picture. The only thing I've done is change the bottom line, right? Now efficiency, because of all of our mathematical techniques, becomes the goal of production and often the excuse for why you can't change things. Okay, so what does neoliberalism have to do with this? Where did it come from? And how do we go about then addressing neoliberalism? The term apparently appeared in 1938, actually sooner than I realized initially. At a colloquium in Paris, Walter Lippmann, a famous media guy, And it was attended globally. People from all over the globe went to this, or at least from the U.S. and Europe. The Europeans were mostly worried about rising fascism on the continent, and the U.S. This was sociologists, economists, business people. The U.S. participants were really worried about what they just saw in attacking the Great Depression, and what they felt like was that there was too much government intervention now into the private sector. And so this public-private distinction, if you hear a politician today talk about the government invading or intruding, then you know it's somebody whose fundamental philosophy is that the state should be over there, mind their own business, not do anything, right?
Yes. Exactly.
So there was a real concern.
Exactly. The state should be over there, or ideally abolished, minding its own effing business.
Two, that the state had become too big, right?
Yes.
And there was also questions about whether democracy even was going to become a problem, because
democracy is tyranny of the majority.
The reaction to the Great Depression, we created Social Security and we created minimum wages.
Yeah, that was bullshit.
And on and on. And so these would become rights, and they have in our minds, really, of being members of a democratic society. And so there was some concern that maybe even democracy was going to get in the way of their dream of a global capitalist system. And so there's a comment about the democracy, right? And so we start to see then that.
Hang on, got another super chat from Naruto. Let's be honest, Jordan Peterson has no chance of winning because, oh, you're right, because Princess Diana is on the list. Well, I mean, do people really want to know if Diana was a narcissist? Diana was obviously an empath. H.G. Tudor has said that she was an empath. Like, an analysis of Princess Diana would be, like, so effing boring and predictable. But, of course, his audience is made up of people who are obsessed with Meghan Markle, so that's probably be where it goes. But it's still, like, boring.
Efficiency as a goal has no national boundary, right? And it may even require a monopoly, something that Adam Smith never thought would exist because of competition. Okay, and so neoliberalism, it requires that power and control be shifted from the private economy to the private economy, and maybe even beyond, beyond our borders, right? It expected capitalism to go wherever it wanted to go. It allowed, the idea was that capital, machines, etc., should be free to go wherever it wants. Of course, we never did that with people. And then it claims again to be liberating.
That would be amazing.
Because after all, it's all going to happen.
Should email him and ask him to.
And that's the realm of freedom, in theory. And so you start thinking about what has happened ever since that 1938 meeting. And part of what I'm trying to do here, and I'm kind of violating the rules of PowerPoint, don't put too much on there, but what I'm trying to do is show.
It's okay, you're violating the rule of economists too.
Natural unfolding progression of freedom and whatnot, that this has been very intentional moves made throughout history to concentrate power, decision-making, resources into the hands of those in the private sector. So right after the meeting, right at the end of World War II, we get Bretton Woods and the IMF, the World Bank, and the GATT, which is now the WTO. Okay, we know too, if you know some cases about the WTO, that there's a big threat to democracy there, right? If some country complains about a law that the U.S. has imposed, we might be told, well, you got to get rid of that law because it violates the rules of international trade. And so that's been a real fear ever since the WTO started in the early 1990s, that we could lose our own democracy. We're going to have to throw out laws that a democratic society has passed. And we have done that. We have found laws out. We get Milton Friedman in the 50s, and you'll see Milton Friedman keep showing up. He was a huge influence in economic thought and in business thought for about 30 decades. But the human capital theory that he talked about said we really shouldn't fund higher education because he argued that K through 12 was okay to subsidize education, but beyond that, there was no public good to having people in higher education.
There is no public good to having people in higher education.
Accountant or a lawyer, and so you alone we're gonna benefit in terms of revenue income from that.
There is no public good to having people in higher education. There is nothing that you learn in college that you cannot learn through an apprenticeship in the real world. There are no practical skills taught in college at all about how to get a job, how to be successful at a job, how to do things that actually matter. I mean, you could argue going to professional schools and stuff like that, which is what I did, which I do think are more applicable to the real world. But let's be honest, I took a whole effing class in college on how to write a press release. Writing a press release is not that effing hard. I could have taken a tutorial on YouTube in about 15 effing minutes and probably as ascertained exactly the same information that I spent 4 months learning in a media relations class in college.
So in other words, he kind of took something that was considered a public good, education, right? And he starts to privatize a big chunk of it, right? And we start to see this theme everywhere, taking something that we think of as a public good and moving it over and privatizing it, right? The 1960s, we get James Buchanan and public choice theory. And here, right, the argument is you can't trust your legislatures to really vote in your interests. They don't really.
Ain't that the truth?
This is a this is foreshadowing
Also
Thatcher.
true.
There's no such thing as a public interest. Only your representative will vote in a way that gets them reelected. And that's all they care about.
That is all they care about.
So you get that. You get Friedman again in the 70s, right? Talking about the social. He writes that article. I think it was in the magazine. I forgot what magazine. That the social responsibility of business is to make a profit. Period. And then that right projects the business world. Now they got a good argument and excuse to only worry about profits, right? Stigler talks about regulatory capture. Well, we really don't really need regulatory boards because they end up just being captured by the people they're trying to regulate. So another way to kind of make regulation seem delegitimate, not authentic. Then you get Richard Posner in the law talking about the economic analysis of law and spearheading that movement in the early 70s, which said judges should distribute rights and rewards based upon the way a market would do it. So he wants to simulate in the courtroom, and this was my dissertation years ago, but he wants to simulate in the courtroom, well, what would a market do in this situation? Who would buy who off? And that's how I'll assign the right, because that way we'll have the least amount of transaction cost. If I'm richer than you and I get the right, or you get the right, I'll just walk out of the courtroom and buy it from you. So we'll just try to reduce cost efficiency by handing the rights off to the people who would have had them in the marketplace anyway. So these are all these ideas that we're just getting hit all over the place. And this is all leading up to where we are today, right? Where we have completely delegitimized the public sector. We've
if only that were true.
We've pulled power.
If only that were true.
And we've made people who work in the public sector seem like teachers, like they don't know what they're doing.
They don't know what they're doing.
Good.
They aren't any good.
And in the 90s,
as a reminder, for people who still believe that public education is for the greater good, according to the Nation's Report Card, this is available at nationsreportcard.gov, less than 36% of students graduating from public high schools today know how to read at a proficient level. Less than 33% of students graduating from public high schools today know how to write at a proficient level. And less than 26% of students graduating from public high school today know how to do math at a proficient level. This is data that has been tracked for decades. This is not partisan data. It is a government website that has been tracking this data for decades. 36% of students graduate from public high schools knowing how to read. 33% of students graduate from public high schools knowing how to write. 26% of students graduate from public high schools knowing how to do math. Don't tell me that the $20,000+ that we are investing in most students in public schools, and some schools are a little bit less, some schools are a little bit more, but it's round about an average of $20,000 per year to educate students in public schools that are not teaching them to read, write, and do math. Let's play a little game called Fun with Math, in which I will take out my calculator on my phone, because we have these things now. $20,000 times 12 years of public education equals $240,000 per student, of which only 36%, nope, that's not in red states, Autumn, that's nationwide, nationsreportcard.gov. 36% of those students that we are paying $240,000 for will graduate from high school knowing how to read. They don't know how to read. They don't know how to write. They don't know how to do math. And that's in a world when we literally have a fucking calculator in our pocket. Don't tell me investing in public education is for the greater good. It is not.
This is a good example that you can't rely on the Democratic Party necessarily to be spearheading any kind of transition. What did Bill Clinton give us? He signed NAFTA. It started with Bush before him, but he signed it. He signed welfare reform, moving welfare from a right, a public citizen right, into a private privilege. You now have to work for it, right? There's a lifetime limit on what you can collect from welfare. We get Graham Leach Bliley from Clinton, which is signing the law that repealed Glass-Steagall. And so now banks and insurance companies can merge. In fact, this law was the result of an illegal merger. When Travel Group merged with Citibank to form Citigroup, Travelers Insurance, and I'm getting the names wrong. Anyway, you got the main people. That was an illegal merger because at the time we had Glass-Steagall. Notice that was passed during the Great Depression. And the idea was we don't want a bank to buy insurance companies, because as you're paying your insurance payment, right, or you're putting money into the bank, the fear was that that money would be used to pay off. What if you had a tornado and everyone needed to cash in on their insurance, right? That would really destabilize banks, so we didn't want to do that. And so we decided to deregulate that. By the way, the guy who spearheaded that merger, about a decade later, in the Wall Street Journal, not a conservative paper, not a liberal paper, or much less a radical paper, said, I think we should go back to Glass-Steagall. The very guy who initiated that merger said that. You don't see that often in print. And so here we are. And this is a picture that I come back to a lot. And I always show my students because to me, it says it all. This is growth in family income by quantiles, right? So this is like, if you ever heard of a Gini coefficient, you're dividing the households, or you're dividing the entire country in fifths. So the poorest 20% of households, next poorest, all the way up to the richest 20% of households. And so you're looking to see, okay, it's showing us as the economy grew, the blue bars are from 1947 to 1973. And what it's saying is,
hang on, I got a super chat from Rottweiler. Thank you, Rottweiler. Okay. Let's invest in public education and add anti-communist subjects to the curriculum and remove red-washed history. Let's see how Marxists will flip their stance in a heartbeat. That would be hilarious. I agree. They used to teach in schools that communism was bad. They wrote whole textbooks that were used in schools to teach that communism was bad. I would be completely in favor of maintaining public education if a core component of the social studies curriculum and the history classes could be teaching that communism and Marxism is one of the greatest evils that has ever existed in the world, that has led to more human death and suffering than any other political philosophy in the world. I would be completely on board with teaching that in public schools. I would even campaign to keep public schools running and to invest more in public schools if they taught in every single grade level that communism and Marxism has led to more human death and suffering than any other bad ideas that have ever existed in the world. And then let's see how much people like who we're watching today believe in public education after that.
as we grew, as GDP grew and the nation grew, and if GDP is a pie, as the pie got bigger, notice every faction of society got a piece and in fact, the poorest 20% got more than the richest 20% in terms of bigger slices of pie, right? So this idea that when a rising tide lifts all boats, that's the picture of the blue bars. 73, the 70s, as you know, were funky decade, too much going on, and so it picks back up at 1979, okay, and it goes to 2009, and that's the red. And look what happens as we grew during that period, right? Now, nearly half of that growth, 49%, went to the richest people, right? So, what the hell happened? Right? Did people suddenly wake up in 1979 and decide to get lazy and not work? Did the wealthiest suddenly produce so many innovations that we just had to give them everything? To me, this is the problem, right? And this is what we have to attack. Okay, so I see neoliberalism as kind of a turn within econ that where you start to see more and more authoritativeness by this transfer of rights, etc., from the public to the private. And one of the problems I had thinking about this a lot was that I was, as an economist, we're trained to look for equilibrium. Of course, I'm trained more broadly than that, but trying to get a handle, trying to get some kind of consistent story about what's happening. And then when I realized, it seemed like all I could see was contradiction, right? And then I realized, then I read at some point that fascism is not about harmony and logic, and that contradiction is kind of the point because it throws you off, right? And so then I started to realize, wow, okay, so I'm on to something, because that's all I see, right? What do we start doing now? We start outsourcing national defense, a public good. We're privatizing it. We're outsourcing it. We're privatizing parts of the prison system. We're creating.
Don't worry about it,
schools.
Grandma. You're fine.
They are public schools, but we're going to put all the books and the money in the private management system, right? And then of course, most recently, right, we're going to regulate the private choices of women, the private choices that supposedly private choices are making about their body. We're putting that now in the public sphere, right? The mask issue was such a contradiction for us, but I guess I'm starting to think now that as we see these contradictions, I'm starting to see that more through that lens of control and the fascist movement that we're experiencing, that we need to stop. Okay. And so resistance was a big theme from the ad, and I'm trying to think, this is where I'm trying to figure out, okay, what do we do, right? And here's the hope, right? There's been ongoing resistance through all these decades. You know, to look back and say we've been moving towards neoliberalism for a long time, yes. But we've had resistance for a long time, right? Carl Polanyi wrote in The Great Transformation that every time a market shows up wherever you are, there's always resistance because there's always disruption, right, in the system. And so even General Electric, who the union called in the 1980s, GE stood for Gone Elsewhere, because at some point they employed more people abroad than they did in the United States. But in the 1950s, they were thought of as generous electric because they had really good benefits and pay. And of course, part of this is, you know, competition for workers after the war. But nevertheless, it was possible for a corporation. There's even some year-end.
Hang on, Beth. The Zoom ended a little bit earlier today than it usually does, so that's probably was the problem. I think I saw you join the Zoom like literally like 2 minutes after we ended. So I'm sorry we didn't get to see you today, but there'll be a Bitchcraft on Saturday at 3 p.m.
That's where they were boasting about how much taxes they paid. Imagine a corporation doing that right now, boasting to the public about how much taxes they paid and how well their workers were paid. In the 60s, we had civil rights movements as a resistance, right? The Great Society. We have war resistance, Clean Air Act in the 70s. Even the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development wrote a report in the 80s criticizing hyperglobalization and referred to free trade as a deceit, right? And then finally, the Zapatistas. So if you asked about resistance before, here's where I see through the economic literature and stuff, interesting movements, powerful movements. I've been doing a little bit more reading on public banking. I think that's a really interesting movement that's going across the country. Look into it. But, you know, pick your poison. There's plenty of places where people are acting today, acting meaningfully. And lastly, I'll end with this. My signage campaign is kind of a silly idea, but one day we had some students in a class and they were talking about the public park. And since it's not mine, and all of a sudden it hit to me, why don't we have signs at the park that say, this belongs to you, treat it well? And why don't we have signs on the highway that says, you know, your tax dollars just put blank amounts here, right? Enjoy the ride. I mean, we need signage. We need signage. This land is yours. And exactly. And this is what I mean here too. You know,
does anyone find it ironic that at the Marxist Antifa conference, they were like, let's just say this land is your land. Well, no, you guys are doing land blessings all the time saying everyone stole the effing land. You literally start every single session you do with a proclamation that this land is not your land. These people don't know their own ideas.
Part of me thinks, okay, we need a stakeholder economy. Everyone's talking about that. But the red is how to talk about it. And here's another thing that's coming up with everybody. We need rhetoric, because if the private sector, everyone thinks of the private sector as freedom, you are not going to take people's freedom away. We have to start talking about giving people freedom. This land is your land. I love that. So I'm trying to figure out, we need to do some of these things intentionally, right? We need to actually come back and have an antitrust law and enforce it. We need to come up with a new way to limit the Supreme Court. And the red is just my off-the-cuff way of trying to change the language so that what people hear is that they're going to get something. Thank you.
Did you catch that Supreme Court thing? Wow. We need to find a way to limit the Supreme Court. Well, that's against the Constitution, bitch. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, and if our invisible and insufficiently acknowledged staff workers can raise this, we'll go on to the question and answer period.
Ooh, a Q&A. I love a good Q&A.
Thank you.
Got about 20 minutes left.
So the procedure for questions here is that we are asking people to line up at the mic if they would like to ask a question. The reason is that things that get said into the mic get recorded.
Q&A is when they say the quiet part out loud more than any other part. You always watch the Q&A.
Do they also get extra credit? I'm sorry. Sure. Yeah, great.
Guys, just so you know, there are people commenting on how many people are in the room. There are probably way more people there. The problem is they're in like an auditorium style room where the first 3 rows look empty, but you guys know where people sit when they come into these things, right? Like when you were in an auditorium style room in college, did you sit in the first couple rows? No, you sat in the middle or the back. So there probably are actually like an okay amount of people in the room. We just didn't see them on camera.
This is a question for both panelists, which is that you both talked about contradictions sort of being at the heart of this question of like, how do we see past fascism, right? Whether that's the contradictions and inconsistencies of our current economic policies or the contradictions within individuals' sense of self in a political order. So my question is, are these contradictions meant to be resolved, or are they meant to be, are they unresolvable? Right? So that's my question.
All right. Well, 2 sides to that answer.
Yes and no.
Yes and no. But actually, to me, and that sort of goes to the heart. Neoliberalism, of course, is remarkably destructive to the quality of our life. And yet within that framework, there are other possibilities that emerge. When
He's
we
a
talk
democratic
about a Green
socialist.
New
They're both
Deal or
democratic socialists.
eco-socialism, we're talking about creating an economy and a way of life that's more decentralized, right? I.e., instead of becoming precarious, we can take control of that, right? Technology is used, as we see with Twitter and Facebook, in very reactionary ways, but it's also a form of interconnection. So we can take the forms of development here and use that contradiction to create a new, much the way in the 30s people saw factory life as creating a different kind of collective meaning. So that's using within the contradiction to build a different kind of future rather than looking back. So I would say yes on that score. You got it?
I'm good.
You're good. Okay.
So actually, I'm going to say something about it too, even though I wasn't asked. So when I teach, I usually tell the students, this is not a spectator sport. You're the one who does the learning here, and you have to be involved in the classroom. I'm up here to be the supporting actor. And I have information to convey to you. If you question me, you get brownie points for it. So I want you to feel free to ask questions and even to question in addition to asking questions. So I wanted to say something about contradiction. Every day contradicts the day that comes before it. Every day changes what it inherits. Every era changes what it inherits. Every generation transforms the world in which it lives. But it only partially resolves the contradictions that it confronts. So it's not to my way of thinking, it's not a question of eliminating the contradictions, but of changing new conditions under which problems will be confronted in the future. And I'm
Kind of like a
reinterpreting
revolution.
in more abstract ways the things that Kurt just said. I think that we have proposals for a more just society, for a more equitable distribution of power, of wealth, and of income.
Oh,
erasing.
we have proposals, professor at Hofstra University. We have proposals for a more just and equitable society where, what did he say? What that wealth and income will be redistributed? For a more equitable society. Let's listen to that again. He basically just said they have proposals to redistribute wealth.
Interpreting in more abstract ways the things that Kurt just said, I think that we have proposals for a more just society, for a more equitable distribution of
A more equitable distribution of power, of wealth, of income. These are college professors saying, well, why don't we just redistribute wealth? I told you they say the quiet part out loud in the Q&A.
power, of wealth, and of income, of erasing the inequalities that we've inherited from 500 years of conquest and colonialism, and from racial hierarchies, and from gender hierarchies. We have the possibility of, at least at this moment, moving in the direction of resolving those contradictions by reducing those inequalities and creating a more participatory society. And I think that that's very much at the heart of what is intended by
A
this
more
conference on
participatory society
anti-fascism,
where you all get
that we're
assigned
not
your
only
jobs
trying
in
to
the
block
fields.
the accession to power of the most reactionary forces that want to drag us back into a worse situation, but we're trying to construct an image of a better society. And in the process of blocking this movement back, actually find a way of moving forward. So, okay, thank you.
I'll bring extra credit out. 5 more seconds for extra credit. 5 more.
Okay.
Thank you. I was just going to ask a question. I'm happy that Kurt talked about Weimar because I'm a leftist and that's what we like talking about, right? And quoting Bloch, talking about which was mentioned that the mass base for fascism tends to be concentrated in the middling classes, right? Hyperinflation in Weimar dislocated the middling classes, and then consequently radical deflation created a mass unemployment movement that was pushed to the left and joined the KPD. We face a similar situation today with a period of high inflation, and then with the Fed raising rates again, moving towards deflation again. So I would ask the panel, as we move forward, it seemed to be during this period of inflation, the middling classes were very angry, saying that no one wants to work, prices are going up, and doing things like January 6th. So I'd ask the panel, how do they think we best inoculate the middling classes specifically against the appeal of fascism? Not so much broadly, but within those groups that are the middling classes. Thank you.
You can go.
You start and I'll finish.
Okay. All right. Well, I think there are two ways. It's sort of what I was trying to get at a little bit. I want to make one comment. One of the big differences between what we're facing today and this on the more optimistic side and what was faced in Italy and in Germany is that fascism took power in Italy and in Germany when the left was on the defensive and the decline. One of the unique things that's going on is at the very moment that we had the rise of Trump, we had Bernie, and not
the
just
rise
Bernie,
of the
but of
capitalist
course
Trump.
the Black Lives Matter movement, the mass organizing that's going on at Amazon and Starbucks. So there's these two forces that are sort of colliding. And in a way, it makes the situation both a little more frightening, but the possibilities are there. And I think the key to that, and to get to your point, is to remain on the offensive in terms of engaging people, right? That actually, as much as my perspective is different from some of the anarchist thinking, it's 100%.
You're not an anarchist, bro. You're not an anarchist. Sorry.
Of thought development and the concept, and we have to take back the word freedom, right? And I would argue, and I won't quote a lot of that, but old friend and dearly departed and old friend and comrade Barbara Ehrenreich when she talked
Comrade.
about the professional middle. That was precisely, there are two groups of people. Oh, one last thing. When we talk about labor law in the United States, there are two groups that were excluded. They excluded, obviously, for racist reasons, farm workers, domestic workers, the poorest of the poor. They also, unlike in Europe, and it's a source of reaction, they excluded the supervisor.
Wait. Did he just say they excluded farm workers and the poorest of the poor for racist reasons? I'm pretty sure he did. Hang on. They excluded, obviously for racist reasons, farm workers and the poorest of the poor. Why does this white, male, cisgendered college professor assume that farm workers and the poorest of the poor are not white? Does that sound a little racist to you? Because that sounds a little racist to me. Let's listen to that again.
Old friend and comrade Barbara Ehrenreich when she talked about the professional middle. That was precisely, there are two groups of people. Oh, one last thing. When we talk about labor law in the United States, there are two groups that were excluded. They excluded, obviously, for racist reasons, farm workers, domestic workers, the poorest of the poor. They also, unlike in Europe, and it's a source of reaction, they excluded the supervisors, the middle class professionals. We need to take that back and organize both sides. And that because, so short answer or too long an answer, but or multiple answers.
It's all because of racism.
That's you go.
I don't know if this is an answer to the question, but when I think about, you mentioned the Fed and inflation. When I think about inflation today, I said to my students the other day, what would you rather have, the Fed fighting inflation? They all know now that unemployment's going to rise. And that was our grown up moment in class that, okay, people actually want unemployment to rise right now. Okay. And so,
well, it's you idiots that are refusing to work.
And they're more fired up trying to figure out how would you do anything else, right? But so I said to them, what would you rather have the Fed continue this, process, which is going to cause deflation, but we're going to go through a lot of pain to get there, right? Or why don't we have Fed accounts for everybody the day they're born? And then when we need to stimulate the economy, you just get a little money in your Fed account, and maybe you're told you've got 6 months to spend this. You want to talk about stimulating an economy, that's going to happen really, really fast.
And that's definitely not going to create inflation at all. That's definitely not going to create like unmanageable perpetual inflation that will reduce the dollar to nothing, so that people are throwing their money away in the streets like in Venezuela. Are you crazy, lady? You are a fucking economist. Allegedly.
And so this is how I'm trying to think of, how do you take the institutions we have in place now and start rerouting them so that there, to me, is a middle class movement, right? We're just going to give because the middle class will spend that money, and we don't give it to anyone who's in the upper echelons. And so I can give you some. That's not deflation.
She's arguing for wealth redistribution. No, you're arguing for wealth redistribution is what you're arguing for. My God,
the basic institutions, and as we tell these stories, how can we retell them or rethink them in a way that, to me, anti-fascism is, how does this get money into the hands of working people? How does it get money into the hands of the working poor?
To her, anti-fascism is redistribution of wealth.
Working poor for a long time was the fastest growing segment of the poor. So the idea that the poor doesn't work is so beyond ridiculous that no one really talks about it. I mean, it's just, not true. So.
Thank you. I just have a kind of a question for Deborah. Can you talk about sort of the room for deconstructionism in your framework? I mean, you're kind of breaking down this public-private distinction. seems like there are other sort of distinctions, thinking about your economic history, that are sort of not being fully interrogated. For example, equality is good, inequality is bad. What about equity? I mean, if
Oh God.
the problem,
Hang on. I want to take best super chat before we listen to them talk about equity. Beth, thank you again. You do know they already raised Fed digital dollar in the main 12 banks. They're exchanging your cash for several times more, but they have 100% control over your money. This is a fact. Oh, yeah. I know, Beth. But making sure everyone knows that is a good idea. So I do appreciate the super chat. It is making me physically ill right now to there's a book about the Chinese Cultural Revolution that talks about the progression of the Cultural Revolution and all that stuff. And it's I was listening to the book. I have the audio version of it. I also have the paperback, but it's easier for me to listen to it. And like what I'm seeing with conferences like this, it's what happened then too. In it's how these ideas got into the masses, right? And it's making me right now physically sick to my stomach to really think about the idea that these are college professors, and you guys in the chat know more about economics than the economics professor. And she's the one teaching the future quote unquote economists, right? And this is how they're dumbing down the populace. They're dumbing down the populace through the schools. They're dumbing down the populace by sending them to college to learn from people who don't know what the F they're talking about, probably because they learned from people who don't know what the F they're talking about. They are using the entire system to dumb down the populace so that they are not equipped with the logic and critical thought to be able to push back against these ideas. This is how the Cultural Revolution happens. It's by people not paying attention, not being smart enough to understand what they're listening to, and not pushing back on what's going on because they're not paying attention and they're not smart enough to understand what they're listening to. It's sickening. It really is. Jen, thank you for the super chat. Again, what happens when the wealth runs out? Well, it's all just just print more money, right? Just print more money, just make more. I appreciate the super chat, Jen. All right, let me listen to this kid's question again.
sort of distinctions, thinking about your economic history, that are sort of not being fully interrogated. For example, equality is good, inequality is bad. What about equity? I mean, if the problem, as I see it, is not just rising inequality, but a lack of fairness in the system. So
they don't consider equality to be fair.
Economic conception of monopoly. I mean, economists, I think, are mostly concerned about monopoly of an industry. But what about monopoly of a geography? I know you and I are both from Southwest Virginia. What if in a rural community, one employer is kind of a monopoly for that region? So the broader point I'm trying to make is, to what extent do you think our understanding of economics needs to be recast so that we break down the sort of paradigms like inequality versus equality that have been kind of created and that our economic models are built around? Thank you.
So when you say our economic models, I guess you mean the standard neoclassical models, because when I think economic models, I think conservative, liberal, and radical, because that's my training. And so I'm constantly
That's her training.
thinking across methodologies and thought processes. So in mainstream economics, right, the efficiency and equity were considered trade-offs, right? And so once you make efficiency the goal, then you don't worry about equity. In fact, that's been a big problem with standard economists.
Autumn, don't be a
completely
retard.
Forgotten about distribution. They made it irrelevant, right? And so those same people will trace their roots to Adam Smith and say laissez-faire, but they've dropped one of his main points, right? Several of his main points, and that's where to me neoclassical theory becomes neoliberalism as a political project.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much for an interesting. So I'm going to have to go fast because my name's Stephanie Nannis. I'm the professor of the one class that is here. So yes,
that gets extra credit, right?
Well, no, this is required. They get extra credit if they go to another one. So,
Oh,
Sorry,
required.
y'all. Sorry.
Yeah, that's
Fucking
okay. Well, that's their choice.
required coursework at Hofstra University. Let's go listen to an economics lecture with an economist that doesn't understand economics.
So we have 3 minutes. So so this is Introduction to Comparative Politics. We're actually studying a whole host of countries.
Right.
Germany, Japan, Britain.
We're studying
give
the
you a
Weimar
list.
Republic.
And I'm hoping to make an assignment out of this anti-fascism panel.
Of course.
So I'm giving you a really hard
course she
question in
is.
3 minutes. Anti-fascism in other parts of the globe, Brazil, how would you help students? And we did a little section on fascism, right? So they have a sense of what that is. But what would you send with students who are trying to think about fascism, anti-resistance, forms of resistance? Is it a totally unfair question? Probably. Do you want to get back to me?
No, I mean, it's a very, very good question, I have to say. But
yeah, how do we bring this to if they're looking at other countries and trying to think about these things?
Well, if we talk, as is it, two sides to this, right? One, if you look at it in terms of the 1930s, what's very, very interesting is, as I mentioned, virtually all of Europe was either under fascist, authoritarian, or very, very right-wing conservative governments by the start of World War II. One or two, I think, not surprising. I think Sweden was a bit of an exception, although even there, Nazi influence was very strong. Same in Asia, really. I mean, Chiang Kai-shek would have been a proto-fascist if Japan hadn't beaten him to it. And in general, there was a great deal of, it was very reactionary, dominant, and even many of the independence movements, including parts of the Indian National Congress, were influenced by fascist thinking at that point. There was the exception with the Americas. And there's something to be thought about. The United States was an exception, most of Latin America too. And it's an interesting conjunction. So these things fall into waves and patterns. I think the key connecting is, and it's not saying that structural racism and other things aren't part of this, they're essential, but it's the rise of a form of capitalism, right? The United States at that point was a relatively progressive capitalism, right? You can, dynamic. I mean, you're talking about political dynamic and growing. Today, the danger of fascism universally that we're facing is because the system's at an impasse. So if you think about it in terms of world systems, I wouldn't recommend this for an undergraduate, but Emanuel Wallerstein, there's some books that address world, but thinking about it systemically, and sort of looking and so trying to see the connections, not just the discrete points. So.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure if I'll see to maybe one more question. Thank you. Unless Deborah, you do have something you want to add to the assignment?
Well, I'm just wondering if you pick a certain country, if there's a relationship between the stage of development they're in and the rise of fascism, because I think as neoliberalism has progressed and gotten more extreme in this country,
they're still here.
We see that, right? So it's definitely partly rooted in economic well-being, although again, that's not enough. The cultural element's important. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you both. Sorry for the out of left field.
You work well on left field.
Yeah, I tried. Okay. Oh, wait, we have one more question?
Yeah.
Oh.
All right, guys. Well, you made it through just one of the panel of lectures from Hofstra University's Antifa conference. And just in case you missed the intro when I went through the other lectures in the series, they're all available on Hofstra University's YouTube channel. I'm going to make sure I download all those just in case. We just watch Challenging the Appeal of Fascism, which apparently Challenging the Appeal of Fascism really would have been better titled Challenging the Appeal of Capitalism, because the entire effing presentation was about how bad capitalism is. It had nothing to do with what any of us might define as fascism at all. In fact, at the beginning of the presentation, they literally said that to be anti-fascist is to be anti-free market capitalism. So we did finally get our definition of fascism. It's capitalism. Huzzah. I'm going to put it on a t-shirt and everything. But in addition to that, they also have a panel on building a global anti-fascist movement. They have a panel on communicating anti-fascism, strategies, tactics, and implications. They have teaching anti-fascism. Oh, that's going to be great. Contemporary European Antifa. They have anti-fascism in the streets. They have a keynote for their Antifa conference. They've got anti-fascism as an anti-colonial project. They've got local anti-fascist activism roundtable, anti-fascist culture warriors. So yes, Hofstra University, private university in New York, in Long Island, like pretty bougie university, had an entire conference all about Antifa. And we've just watched one session today. We might watch another one for happy hour on Friday, because there's a couple more I want to watch. Maybe we'll even watch one for Socialism Saturday. I'm not sure yet. And I am going to be downloading these guys just in case. Again, like, these are on Hofstra University's YouTube channel. So just in case they make them private or something like that, we always download the files. That's the way it goes. All right, guys, that is all we have for the stream today. As a reminder, I will be back at 5 p.m. tomorrow, because I do stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. on this here YouTube channel and all the other places that you might be watching me as well. Please do make sure you mount that like button. Please make sure you are subscribed if you are not already. And also do make sure you are subscribed to my Substack, which is Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Check out the latest article that I posted last night about this bill in California that will quite literally arrest parents for speaking at school board meetings if they are deemed to have tormented or terrorized anyone. And the definition of torment or terrorize is obviously really loose. So it could literally mean saying something that someone doesn't want to hear, because of course the left thinks that words are violence and that questioning your lived experience is literally murder. So who knows what these things mean? And I think innocent people are going to end up in jail for going to school board meetings and saying things they don't like. Who's to say, though? Who's to say? And guys, as a reminder, if you do want to support the work I'm doing, please make sure you sign up for a paid subscription on my Substack for $8 a month or $80 a year. I am completely 100% funded by you. I cannot keep doing this without you. I am on a goal to hit 1,000 paid Substack subscribers before the end of the year. We're totally on track to do it. I'm really excited about it, but we still do have a little ways to go. And your support today would really help me out. You can also support my work on Locals, on Patreon, by making a one-time gift on activelyunwoke.com. All the information is in the description below. But my preference, my strong preference, is to sign up for Substack, because that is my content hub moving forward, and you will get access to a variety of perks as a result. I will be back at 5 p.m. tomorrow, guys. Take care. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you soon.